Namaste and welcome to Sangam Talks. And today on Person Behind the Persona, the series that we have been doing, we have done with Dr. Conrad Elst, and we have also conducted one interview with Professor Kapil Kapoorji. And today we have with us a very esteemed speaker and very esteemed person that we want to interview from a long time, the ever evasive Shrikant Talageri ji. We've had Shrikant ji on our Sangam talks a few months ago. I think it was last year. And Shrikant ji had spoken about the Rig Veda battles, the Dashrajanya war, and also the chronology and the history behind it. So I'll quickly introduce Shrikant ji. So Shrikant ji is a BCom D-Lit honors. He has written 4 major books from 1993 to 2019. Voice of India is the publication on the Aryan problem or the Aryan Invasion Theory versus the out of India theory debate. And he has provided conclusive evidence that the original homeland of the Indo-European languages was in North India. He has also written detailed articles on music, history, religion, and politics. So, with that, Shrikant ji, I welcome you. And most of us don't know you as a person. You know, we've seen your work, we have read your books, we have been inspired and we've been awestruck by the work you have done. The body of work is not possible by a single human being, at least in one life. So, I really am honored to have you, Shrikant ji. Namaste.
Namaste.
So, Shrikant ji, I'll begin to start this biographical interview. We want to know about your personal life, how you grew up, and what motivated you to do the work that nobody else has ever been able to do on the Vedic chronology and many other aspects. So, Shrikant ji, my first question to you is, how were you while growing up? Your growing up years, how was the social life, the family life, the academic environment? What all influenced you growing up?
Down nostalgia lane, Bombay in the 60s, where I've written about my childhood quite a bit. And but actually, I stay in Mumbai, Grant Road area, and we have been staying in the same house since 107 years. Because right even before my father was born, because ours is the first cooperative housing society in the whole of Asia. So when we completed 100 years, 7 years ago, there were articles in all the newspapers and photographs of our colony and our people also. And that is when I had written that article on down nostalgia lane. Now, in that I have written most of the things. So we have been staying in this house, same house, before the birth of my father, and we are a typical middle class family. You know, our community, Chitrapur Sarasat community, most of the people, although our native places are in Karnataka, most of us are staying in Mumbai. Now, of course, they are all over the world. But during in the last 1 century, I think at least 70% of the community used to live in Mumbai itself. So we were, and especially in our area, now it is spread out. And you know, 50 years or so ago, the atmosphere was completely different, social. You know, there was no TV, certainly no mobile and the internet. So people had much more social intercourse among each other. Relatives used to come and stay. We used to go and stay in relatives' houses. We used to go to meet people. They used to come to meet us, neighbors. So now that life is completely different. So we lived a typical middle class life. Now I studied in St. Xavier's High School and then Signam College, and then I got a job in the bank. Now what happened is that you know. Um, Whatever what I am now is because of the atmosphere that was there since my childhood. You know, we were a typical, as I said, middle class family and very culturally broad-minded and cosmopolitan and all that. Now, whatever I have done, I feel that first of all I must say that I owe everything to my parents, because whatever I have done is because of certain things that I have inherited from my parents. Like my father was very systematic, methodical, and this thing in his work, both in personal life and in his office work and all that. In my personal life, I'm not very systematic and methodical and all that. But in my research work, I am. And my mother used to be very sharp, you know, when so many things were in front of her, she could her pick up, like, you know, Arjuna could see the I have the bird. She used to pick up the odd man out or the particular point which is stood out. So I think these two qualities have helped me in my work. Another thing is that they taught me to be, they were very honest people. Honesty, they taught me honesty. So in my work, I'm very honest. In because of that, I make enemies on all sides also, and I cannot accept nonsense from anyone. And I write. So that is there. But because of that, I managed to keep progressing in my work. So that is the main thing, and the first thing what I wanted to say about my family, social, and this thing.
Shrikantji, I wanted to know how were you as a child? Were you naughty? Were you silent? Were you observant? What kind of a child? Curious child?
Yeah, I had a typical childhood of that time. I was not, very sports minded, to be very honest. I used to be reading all the time. And reading means not intellectual books, but, comics, story books, and all that. And my childhood hobbies, if you want to know, were mainly reading and music. I used to listen to the radio. And my two dreams were that when I grew up, I would have a big library full of books, and another I would have a big room full of music records. That time there were gramophone records, and in Hindi, Marathi, semi-classical, North Indian, South Indian, all kinds of music. We were very much interested in all that in our house. My mother used to be a singer actually, and of course after marriage and after her birth she stopped. But in the 50s, people used to go and sing in the radio. They used to be called to sing live on the radio, and afterwards they used to get this actual assignments in films or to have records made and all. So she was going in, singing in the radio for some time, but then after we were born, it all ended, unfortunately. So that is very sad. She was restricted to the house after that. She became only a pure housewife. But because of that, we have a great love for music. And another thing is, I had that hobby. Like as I said, my father was very methodical and this thing. He used to, even in his office work, he was known for his very methodical work. No, I had that habit. I remember even when I was in the first standard and all, I used to just take a paper and just write lists of birds, bird names that I know, crow, sparrow, pin. And my mother used to say, why are you wasting pages like that? But that habit of classifying things, listing things, that is always is what helps me in my work. And I had three ambitions actually. One was, I wanted to be a writer because I used to read all sorts of storybooks and all, and I wanted to be actually a storybook writer. So, second ambition was I wanted to do something for Hinduism, and my third ambition was, we used to see all these mythological films in which, the rishi comes out majestically from the Himalayas and then with his kamandal and then he throws the water, holy water on someone and blesses them or curses them. I used to say, when I grow up, I want to become a rishi and go in the Himalayas and become popular. Now, my mother used to say, I used to be very scared, at night to go alone into a room or to go to the toilet. So, my mother used to say, first you learn to go to the toilet alone at night, then talk about going and staying in the Himalayas. So these are my three hobbies. I can say, we, have fulfilled all my hobbies to some extent, with all my ambitions and hobbies, because, I have a big collection of books, story books. All, even I still read the books I used to read in childhood again and again, like Enid Blyton's, then P.G. Wodehouse, Agatha Christie's, Stanley Gardner's, then Georgette Hare's. Of course, Harry Potter also is the new this thing. And I have a almost complete collection of all these books. And also all the classics. We used to read Greek mythological stories. We used to read Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan books, Rajgopalachari's Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagwan Parshuram, Krishna Avatar, and all those books. We used to get Bhavan's journal. We used to get Blitz, and my uncles, my auntie, my mother's cousin brothers used to stay as paying guests in a house because that time on my father's salary, he could not bring up three children. So we used to keep paying as relatives who used to come from the ground. Now they used to get all these current Mother India, Shankar's Weekly, Bhavan's Journal. So I used to read all that. So I had a very wide reading this thing. We used to get comics of all kinds. My favorites still, which you don't get are like Sugar and Spike, Little Lulu. I still remember Superboy comics. Long before the films came, we used to read all the Superboy, Superman comics and Phantom comics and all kinds of things. So I had a wide this thing, and that I have, although I don't have comics and all, I have all these books. Secondly, in my computer, I have a huge collection of music. I have practically any old Hindi film song that you can name. I have it with me. in audio and video, and music Marathi also. And I like also Gujarati folk songs. I love Yakshagan music of the South. I like Karnataka Sangeet. I like to listen to, that there is that annual function where hundreds of people gather together and chant Tyagaraja's Pancharatna Kritis in a place in Tamil Nadu. So I have downloaded those. I love to listen to that also. So I have music. Those two I have completed, and I think indirectly, I have always also completed my three ambitions by my books. Firstly, I wanted to be a writer. I am a writer, though not of storybooks. I wanted to do something for Hinduism. I think I am doing something for Hinduism through my books. And thirdly, though I have not myself become a rishi in the Himalayas, but Conrad Elst, when he wrote the review of my third book, he referred to me as the modern present day scion of India's ancient rishis. So, in a way, I have completed all my ambitions. So, in that reason, respect, I am quite satisfied with what I have done.
Thank you, Shrikantji. And you had any brothers, sisters? How was your relationship with your brothers? What all they taught you? How they influenced you?
Well, I don't know if they had influence on me because my they're quite different. My sister was extremely outgoing, and my brother also. Like I said, I was not particularly interested in sports and all that. Was very interested in every kind of games and sports. Also, as I said, in my personal life, I'm not very systematical and methodical. But my brother is extremely like my father. He also keeps note of everything. Every paisa that is spent. My father till the last day he used to keep records of what the daily expenses. So there we are all three different in a way. So we have all had our own this thing. But of course, I have always had the support and the support of my parents and friends. So that is right.
Thank you, Shrikantji. I'll move on to the next question. And I think Dr. Conrad Elst, the love you both have for each other and the way you both have contributed to the whole Aryan invasion, myth busting, I think is
Yeah.
wonderful. And you both are rishis in your own sense. So Shrikantji, I'll ask you the next question about your life. So how were your college years and what were your interests then?
Yeah. See, many people say that college life is when they enjoy social life and this thing. But I was in Signam College. And that college, unlike, say, for example, St. Xavier's College, it did not have a big ground and all that. It's just a building at Churchgate. And I think there is a ground and all elsewhere. And at that time, actually, when I was in college, I should tell you that I used to be in my school, St. Xavier's School, when they taken the IQ test. I had got the highest in many years. And also, they said I could take anything. But the thing was, I was not interested in any science subject. And at that time, if you are intelligent, you should become a doctor or engineer or something like that. And that was what my father expected. So I simply hated science subjects, so I didn't want to take them. And I never really thought of what I should do. I should have taken arts. But my father used to say, only girls take arts. You should take. So that was the kind of thing. So just as a reaction, I just took commerce. I used to love maths in school. So somehow I thought commerce has to do with maths, must be having to do with maths. And in school, when I was in the ninth standard, I have written an article on it, my tryst with mathematics. I'd actually invented some mathematical formulae. And then, the assistant principal sent me to the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, where an ex-student of his was there. And he advised me that after you finish school, and college, you can come here and become a researcher in maths. But these things come like inspiration. I couldn't imagine myself sitting in an office and churning out formulae as a daily job. So I just lost interest in that thing. Now, what happened was that my main ambition during college days. So you see, because I didn't like commerce, I hated that the subjects. Like for example, there was a advertising and publicity, and I found it so mercenary that subject that I hated it. And maths, I don't know why many people like trigonometry. My niece does, for example, but I found it completely different from what maths I had expected, and I hated trigonometry also. The result was, that I didn't study my commerce subjects at all. I used to go to all the libraries, the American, British university, and take notes. on all kinds of subjects, like plants, animals, languages, alphabets, all the world, because I have always been interested in world culture. Since childhood, we were exposed to Indian culture as well as all world culture. So I have a very broad attitude towards cultural thing. There is, for example, one book, story book that my father had bought when I was in the second standard, a big fat one called Once Long Ago. If you see on Wikipedia, you will see there's an article on it. It was published in 1962. It has stories from all over the world, American Indian, Aztec, Maya, Chinese, Arabic, and more than the stories, there were pictures accompanied, colorful pictures which showed, the very heart of that culture. And since childhood, I was fascinated with all world cultures. So, and what I discovered was that Indian culture is the greatest not in the sense of wanting to convert people to our culture or something like that, but in every respect. Like, for example, if you take natural culture, climate, topography, plants, animals, we have the widest range in all of that. For example, the hottest areas in the world are in India, now presently in Pakistan, Jacobabad and all. And according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, India has the largest area outside the Antarctic regions covered with permanent ice and snow. Then we have areas in Rajasthan which don't get any rainfall, and we have the highest rainfall in the world in Assam and Meghalaya. So you see, we have every type of climate, every type of topography. So India's contributions to the world in every respect have been this thing. We give so many plants, so many. The domestic fowl is Indian. The Indian cattle and buffalo were domesticated in India, and the domesticated elephant also. So India's contribution has been very great. If you see languages and races, there are supposed to be four races in the world. Um, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, and a fourth one, Australoid, is often posited. Now, India is the only place in the world which has all these four races native to it. We have most of us are Caucasoid. Then we have people belonging to the Mongoloid race in the, Himalayas and Northeast. Then we have the only pure Negroes outside India, outside Africa, in the Andaman Islands. And then the Veda people of Sri Lanka are Australoid people outside Australia. So you see, we have everything. In languages, we have 6 of the 19 or so language families in the world, and 4 of them are native to India: Dravidian, Andamanese, Burushaski, and also, as I have proved, Indo-European was originally Indian. So you see, when you go to that, we have the widest culture of human civilization also. We invented most of the things in, say, martial arts or medicine, our contributions in every field, science, arts, architecture, music, and we have the widest range. I have written an article, India's unique place in the world of numbers and numerals. So even in the present time, we have the simplest number system in the world in the Andaman Islands. And even in ancient times, we had the most complicated number system in the world in Sanskrit. Then musically also, the Veda people are supposed to have the most primal form of music. And Indian classical music has the most highly developed system of uh, ragas and talas. So in every respect, we have, if you see clothes, you have people in the certain tribal areas who are in Kerala or Tamil Nadu, I believe I have seen pictures of that, who are almost in the nude, or the Andaman Islands. And then we have all kinds of costumes in Ladakh, or see very heavily fitting costumes. So we have every single variety. I think India is if you see some of the dances of the Nagas, they remind you of American Indian dances. So you see, India has everything, and I wanted to prepare an encyclopedia showing the greatness of Indian culture. And then I set about, that's what I was doing in college. All the 4 years, I was going and taking notes on everything. But then I realized, that it is an impossible task for one person. And then what happened was, I decided to write stories. And then someone told me, why don't you write in Konkani, your mother tongue? So I said, I thought yes, and I started. But then I realized that the alphabet, Devanagari or Roman, is not sufficient to write Konkani, which has many more sounds. So then I became interested in languages and alphabets in particular. I learned, numbers 1 to 100 in more than 100 languages of the world, including African, American, Indian, Australian, Aboriginal, all that. And I learned them by heart. Now, of course, I don't remember them all. But also, I learned every single alphabet except Chinese, which is, of course, too difficult. And others, all I learned all, Greek, Armenian, Hebrew, Sinhalese, Burmese, and Mongolian, Japanese katakana alphabet, everything. So I used then while I was doing all this, I came again across this concept of Aryan invasion. So then that's how I worked onto that. Now what happened was in all this, my college life studies suffered. So I hardly used to be in the college. I used to be in all these libraries all day long. Now what happened was that I was just passing although I was brilliant in school, here I was just getting 38%, 39% pass class. And in the last year, I was desperate because what I wanted was a regular job, which would give me my bread and butter. And after that, I could just do my work on the side without bothering about where I'll be earning money. So my father was in a bank. So I thought, yes, I should get a job in a bank. Now, I couldn't get it on my past class marks. So I was desperate that before I completed my BCom, I should get a job because then I could get it on my SSC marks. So just luckily, when I was in the last year of college, I managed to get this job in Central Bank of India, which really saved my life, I can say, and I'm very grateful to that institution. And so even in the last year, which I did while I was working, I managed to get past class only, but it didn't matter. So I got the job. That is how I took the job in the bank, and it gave me freedom. I never took promotions also because I didn't want to be entangled in the bank. This thing. I used to do my work very diligently in my whatever work I had. Once I came out, it was over. I used to do the other thing. So that is how my job was. That's how I took the bank job and how it fitted me perfectly.
So, weren't your family ever curious that you don't take promotions, you don't bother about any worldly things?
Oh yes, my father was, very disappointed. He said he was so clever and just see what he's become. He's become a bank clerk like me. There's no future in banks, and he used to be very disappointed. But once I started writing these books, and when Sitaram Goyalji agreed to publish my first book in '90s, then once he phoned home, and my father took the phone and he said, "You must be very proud of your son. He's a historian." So after that, my father changed his attitude, changed completely. He became proud rather than ashamed that I was a bank. And people used to ask him, "Your son is a historian, it seems." So that compensated for not being a doctor or engineer. And yeah, that is it. So he also reconciled to this. And
I read
yeah, incidentally, when I was talking about why I became attracted to Hindutva, I should tell, like books I used to read all the time. And but in the first standard, when I first joined this Saint Xavier school, in every Christian school there is a crucifix above the teacher's desk, and there is subtle indoctrination takes place. So we were taught about how we should pray to God, we should go to chapel every day, and this and that. So all that was going on in the first standard. Then I didn't really understand anything. And at that time, a film had come on Jesus Christ, and my parents had gone to see it. And after they came back, they were discussing it and saying how he was ill-treated and how badly he was treated and what that sort of thing. So I asked, "What is it?" So they told me that same. It's about Jesus Christ, who is in your school. You must have seen his. So I said yes, and I was quite happy. But then, two uncles of mine, as I said, my mother's cousins, who were staying in a house, they started making fun of me. You know how you tease children. They told me, "Are do you know Saint this Francis Xavier was the one who drove our ancestors out of Goa into Karnataka as Saraswats. They did the Inquisition. They destroyed our temples." So I said, "Of course not." And we were just bandying words. But then I went inside, and my father, was telling my mother, "Why should they tell him all this? He should feel proud of his school." And that, had a more effect than what they said. Because I felt from my father's words that what they were saying, I had taken it as a joke. But from my father's words, I realized it was true. And if it was true, I didn't see why I should ignore it and be proud of the school. So then I realized that there is such a thing as Hindu identity, and there are forces attacking that Hindu name. It was just in the first or second standard, and it was like a transformation in my life at that very period. No one in my house was Hindu minded in that sense, They used to be anti-Congress. They used to vote for Socialist Party like George Fernandez and all that sort of thing. But there was no Hindu with this thing as such. But I became Hindu after that, minded. And in school, we had to compulsorily say Christian prayers and all. I used to quietly say our own Hindu prayers. And I used to tell other Hindus to also say your own prayers. So that in some way I became Hindutva minded without any RSS or any other kind of influence. In fact, I became acquainted with the RSS after 1975. I read the book Tragic Story. No, that book by Collins and uh, Lapierre, I think. Lapierre. It was about partition, which came out in the emergency, and in that he had criticized the Hindu Mahasabha and RSS during the independence days. So I read it and I became interested. I wanted to join the Hindu Mahasabha and RSS. So I went searching out to find where I could this thing, and finally I joined it. But I was not this thing because I realized that they don't really. I mean, Mahasabha is practically non-existent, and the RSS at that time I found that they didn't really have a cultural attitude. It was just gathering people together for political purposes, gather students together into Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, gather workers together into Mazdoor Sangh, and then all of them are channelized towards the political wing of the party. Like that time it was Jan Sangh, which got merged into Janta Party, and then I found that even the Janta Party, the Jan Sangh was the only faction which abandoned all its principles. And ever since then, I have a notebook in which I had written an article at that time, in which I noted all the lapses of the uh, Jansang segment of the Janta Party. And after that, although I continued to have friendly relationships with all the RSS people of every wing and attend all the programs and all, I was never, an RSS person. I was a Hindutva person on my own. So this I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Shrikantji. That's exactly, I was going to ask the next question, that how come growing up in post-independent India with this Nehruvian shadow looming large, and you being a Brahmin and this Brahminical patriarchy, mostly the Hindus or the Brahmins wanted to abuse their own ancestry. So how come you went into the Vedas and the Rig Veda and the Aryan Invasion Theory? You
Yeah.
partly answered that, but what drove you to meeting Sitaram Goyalji? What was the first meeting like?
Yeah. So what happened was, there used to be a magazine called Mirror. It was a small sized magazine, that time we used to read all those magazines, film magazines also, like Stardust and all, Illustrated Weekly of India, then Eve's Weekly, which had all kinds of stories and all, and this Mirror and Bhavan's Journal. Now these had more cultural articles. Now Mirror, there was an article when I was in, it must be in 70 or something, 1970, which was about that a favorite topic of many people, that Chandragupta of Sandracotus of the Greek text is not Chandragupta Maurya but Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty, and that's why the date should go back and all that. So I was thrilled by it, and actually that is what brought me into this field of chronology. Okay, but right now I do not actually. I find that I don't support that claim. I don't go into that business because various things. But that is what first brought me into the thing. Secondly, what happened was that I read someone. I went to Savarkar Southern. There was Savarkar Southern here, and some person that because I wanted to buy actually a book by May It Please Your Honor by Nathuram Godse. Now I wanted to read that book. So I went to get it, and then that person sitting there. There was some person called Balarao Savarkar who used to sit there. He told me, read these books. There were thin, small booklets by Sitaram Goel. He said, read them. They are very interesting. So before that, I had read a book, Tragic Story of Partition by Hove Sheshadri, an RSS book. And I was very impressed by it. And I saw that one of these booklets was a commentary on that book. So I immediately, and the books were just, 3 rupees, 4 rupees at that time. So I bought 2, 3 books and came. And there was, the story of Islamic imperialism in India and Muslim separatism causes and consequences. And when I read those books, I was so thrilled. I realized I had found the person whom I should contact for my own writing. So I immediately wrote to Sitaram Goel. On the address was there in the book, and I asked him to send me all the books. I sent a check. That was the non-internet days, if you remember, in the 70s. So he sent those books, and then I read all of them. And after a few years, when I decided, what happened was, because of that interest in chronology also, uh, I got interested in writing about this. I realized because of my studies in languages that the Aryan invasion theory had no basis. So I wanted to examine it. So I went into all the arguments which are there for it. I collected them, and then I wrote to Sitaram Goiji saying, I want to write a book on this, and will you publish it? Because I want my book to be among your Voice of India books. So he wrote to me, see, I don't appreciate the PNO type of books. So if that is the kind of thing you're writing, I don't want it. But if you think you can deal with this subject, you send me a sample of your writing and I'll consider it. So I sent him the first 3 chapters which I had already written, which were not about the subject. It was about the political corollaries of the subject. If you see my first book, the Aryan Invasion Theory and Indian Nationalism. So the first section is 3 chapters on the political aspects of the theory. So I sent it to him, and within 4 days, I received back a postcard from him. He said, I received your book yesterday night. I sat through the night and read it. I will definitely publish your book. I'm sure you can deal with this. So I was thrilled. And then I started going into all the different aspects of that. And many times I was discouraged because no one else has really done studies on this. So had done at that time, certainly. So I was thinking, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to do this? But then because of Sitaram Goelji's confidence in me, I realized I had to go through it. And then I finally managed to find the answers to everything. And I sent him the book in 91, and it was published in 93. In 92, I sent him the book. And in 93, March or something, the final publication came out. And Girilal Jain, who was the editor of Times of India at that time, he read the book and he wrote a review of it in Times of India center page, which was, his last column actually, because he expired after a few days, unfortunately. And because of that, I got the name. This is the person whose book was praised by Girilal Jain. So because of that, I got a boost. Then, up till then, let me tell you, I had not seen a copy of the Rig Veda also. I had dealt with it indirectly based on, the books by Malati Shendye, P.L. Bhargav and others. But after that, I decided, let me actually deal with the Rig Veda itself. I wanted to give the chronology of the Rig Veda. So I decided to go by the table shown in Bhargava's book about the rishis. But then I found that when I tried to go by his chronology, everything became topsy-turvy. Like, he showed Vishwamitra and Vasishta as the latest rishis, and he showed Atri and Kanva as the earliest rishis. However, everything showed that it was the opposite. The ancestors of Atri and Kanva are shown composing hymns with Vishwamitra and Vasishta. And the descendants of Vishwamitra and Vasishta are shown composing hymns with Atri and Kanva. So that shows that Atri and Kanva were long after this. So then I decided, that I won't go by his chronology, which is based on Puranic stories, which are all jumbled up anyway. You can prove anything from them. So I decided to go only by the Rig Veda. And that is how I wrote my second book, the Rig Veda, a historical analysis, which was in which I classified the Rig Veda into, old, middle, and all that. Now, what happened was that after I did that, I based it completely on the data within the Rig Veda, as I've shown in my book. Now, after that, I found that this actually fitted in with the chronology of the Western Indologists, because they have also said that the family book have also pointed out that book 5, although it is a family book, is also belonging to the later period. Now, based on all this, I had, in my second book, I had pointed out the old and new books. However, I had not given any, after I had did that, but I said, I cannot give any absolute dating until some proof comes. Like you cannot say something is 2500 BC until you actually get some evidence, archaeological datable evidence. So, but in spite of that, I gave a tentative chronology. I said, that the new period of the Rig Veda starts from after 2500 BC and the old period goes before that. So now what happened was in 2000 itself, after this book came out, and in that I had written a chapter on Michael Witzel because I found that he had criticized my first book without having read it. So then I examined his articles and I wrote a chapter showing how he contradicted himself and gave all kinds of wrong information and wrong interpretations. So what happened was that after that I was contacted by another lecturer from Harvard University. And after the book was published, I got the publisher to send a copy of the book to Michael Witzel. Now, after that, another lecturer from there contacted the Ashok Chaubale in Mumbai and said that Michael Witzel is interested in offering me a fully paid scholarship under him at Harvard, only if I were to be flexible in my views and not too rigid in my views. So, and now you see, in one way, this is a, a typical sort of tactic. Now, I did not want to accept it because obviously I did not want to leave my parents and go. And secondly, I don't like traveling for long distances and all. And I couldn't leave Bombay and go. As I said, I don't like to go outside Bombay for long. So I couldn't imagine going and staying in Harvard. And for various other reasons, I obviously didn't want to accept that offer. And obviously, I could not modify my views as per his convenience because I was going by the data. So I conveyed my this thing to Ashok Chaubale, who must have conveyed it to that lecturer. And then what happened was, Conrad has told me that there is a discussion going on the internet in which they are saying that, spoked wheels were invented in 2200 BC. And they are found mentioned throughout the Rig Veda, which shows that the Rig Veda is after that date. So then I said, see, if my dating of the Rig Veda is correct, then the spoked wheels will not be found mentioned throughout the Rig Veda. They will be found mentioned only in the new books and they will not be there in the old books. So I checked up where all those words are mentioned. And to my surprise, yes, all the references are only in the new books. So that sort of confirmed my dating. And then what happened was, they had no answer to that. That proves, that the old books go before the invention of spoked wheels. So, according to them, the Aryans entered India in 1500 BC, and after that they composed the Rig Veda. But this shows that the old books go back beyond 2200, long before 2200 BC. So then another thing that happened was, Michael Witzel was writing comments on the internet saying that the Mitanni evidence proved that the Rig Veda was after 1500 BC. So then I examined the Mitanni evidence, and again I found all the Mitanni names and words are found only in the new books, not in the old books. So that got me into this chronology thing. Then I examined the Avesta. I found a book which gave the common names in the Avesta and Rig Veda, and again, all those common names are found only in the new books, not in the old books. So this set me off on that trail of my third book, the Rig Veda and the Avesta, the final evidence, in 2008. Now what happened is this subject about old Rig Veda and new Rig Veda is something that I had come across right in 92 when I was doing research. Because certain people like Kusalkar, etc., have referred to this. They have said that the Rig Veda contains a new layer of words which is found only in the last part of the text. So from that time, I was interested in knowing who has done research on this. But actually, no one has really done research on this. There was one Hopkins, Edward Hopkins, who had done research on book 8 of the Rig Veda, a paper called Pragathini. Now, he died in 1920 or before that. So you see, after that, no one has done research on this. So I regard him as the pioneer in this Vedic chronology. So I decided to actually, if no one else has done this, let me do it. So now I have written articles on that subject. I have found, and now within this month itself, I will be uploading a blog in which I will be giving a complete list of all the new words in the Rig Veda, which are found only in the new 5 new books. They occur almost 7,000 times in the new books, and they are completely absent in the old books. Completely zero versus 7,000. So it is quite a proof. And as I said, any argument on this Vedic history, if you apply this criterion of old Rig Veda and new Rig Veda, you find that you get your answer. Instead of debating senseless things, you just see where is it found. Oh, it's found only in the new Rig Veda. So that is a very important. It will become a very important criteria in analyzing Rigvedic, Indo-Iranian, and Indo-European history. So that is what I'm doing right now, and I will be putting it up by the end of this month. I almost finished it. I'm again going through the Rigveda in detail, checking up all the words.
It's
In the
perfect.
meantime, I'm writing books. I wrote writing blog articles on various topics like music, and I reviewed the films Kashmir Files, and now there is another film come about the Mopla Rebellion, which is not yet released. But I saw a preview of it 4 weeks ago and 4 days ago, and I immediately put up a review of the book of the film. So I'm doing all these things, but now this is my main work, which will be coming out in this month.
So for all
Yeah.
our viewers, Shrikantji writes a very interesting blog. In fact, it's a whole history book in itself. For all of you who are wanting to keep up to date with Shrikantji's work and are a fan of his work, please do visit his blog. It goes by his own name, Shrikant Talageri, at Blogspot. That's I put the link in the YouTube description at the bottom, and you can visit his blog and keep to it. So, Shrikantji, I want to know how long did your first book take, and how much patience you required to go through it? Did you feel like giving up at some point in time?
Yes, yes, I do many times. But and especially recently the health problems come up and all that. But I feel that I am the only, because no one has done this work after Edward Hopkins. No one has taken up this work of chronology, and I have done other things like I have shown how uh, the emigration of Indo-European groups from India is actually recorded in the Rig Veda. The ancestors of the Iranians, the Greeks, Albanians, and Armenians are actually named in the Dasharatna battle. And I have explained all the linguistic proofs for the out of India theory, and shown how all the Aryan Invasion Theory arguments, linguistic arguments, are wrong and flawed. So this is, but now this work of classifying the Rig Veda into old and new is the central thing which should be taken into consideration for any analysis.
Shrikantji, I was asking how many years it took you for your first book to write your first book. How many years it
Yeah.
took?
Well, in 88 or 89, I decided I would do it. And I wrote to Sitaram Guruji. And once he gave me the green signal, I set about. And I had to go to the university library. I had to consult all sorts of things like Santali dictionary. Who knows Santali in Mumbai at that time in 88 and 89? So I had to go and search for all kinds of materials, all on mythologies, different Indo-European mythologies, on languages, and everything. So then that first book, what I had done was I took all the arguments of the AIT and wrote one chapter on each of them. So in the second one, I concentrated on the Rig Veda itself. On the third one, I went even further and concentrated even more deeply along with the Avesta and the Mitanni evidence. So that was the three books. Recently, I wrote my fourth book in 2019 after Tony Joseph's book on the genetics argument. So which really has nothing to do with the AIT or the OIT actually. So now I'm concentrating on this, and once this is over, let us see. Because you think it's all over, and then something else comes up. So but this one will be a strong weapon in our hands, a strong tool and a strong weapon.
Yes,
This classification into old and new. Yeah.
absolutely, Shrikantji. And the West is always obsessed with proving the Aryan invasion theory. But with you and Dr. Els, I think we have a solid ground where nothing can ever prove that myth of Aryan invasion theory. Thank you so much, Shrikantji. I want to ask you this question: that what is your advice for all those youngsters who look up to you and want to go into this chronology, dating, and our ancient history? What is your advice to them in today's times? It's a very difficult time, but what is your advice?
See, I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice because people have all kinds of views, and if you don't agree with their views, then they immediately go against you. That kind of thing is there. But nevertheless, I would say first thing is you must actually look at the data. If there are some arguments against you, you have to examine them, not just brush them away. And you should have a large cosmopolitan view of the world culture. That is the main thing which helped me along, because this thing, oh, as Veda is the center of the universe and everything came from the Vedas and all cultures came from the Vedas, everyone migrated from the Vedic area. That sort of, if you are concentrated in a certain fixed groove, you don't go. So you must be broad, have a broad perspective, and most of all, you must be honest. You know, if you're wrong, like so many times in all my books, when I found that something of mine is not correct, in the next book I have corrected it and pointed out that this was wrong. This is the correct thing. And like for example, I had taken the Sarayu in the Rig Veda to be some tributary of the Indus based on M.L. Bhargav's book. But recently, in one blog, someone questioned it. He said, I can't see how it can be. And I realized that I had just brushed it under the carpet all these years. So I took up that subject and I found out that yes, that Sarayu is the Sarayu of Afghanistan. And it is part of the emigration from India to the West. It fits into the story perfectly. So you see, if you accept someone's objections and examine them, then you probably get more proof for your theory, which is what I have discovered every time. Like when Witzel spoke about the Mitanni words, I had just thought what proof will be there in that. So I had ignored it in my first two books, just mentioned it in short. But when he raised those objections, I went into that in detail. And then I got the proof for my third book, the Rig Veda and the Avesta, the final evidence. So you see, if you find something is pointed out as a mistake in your this thing, you have to check it. If it is a mistake, you have to correct it and find out how. Because I found that whatever mistakes I have corrected, they are just mistakes. They don't change the final conclusions up till now. So that is all. Hard work, honesty, and most of all, a love for your identity. All identities. If you love your own identity, you will love and respect all other people's identities and their feelings for their own identity. That is what I feel.
And Shrikantji, before we wrap up, I want you to tell us the four strengths you think you have as a person that keeps you going, and your basic characteristic traits that you are proud of, and you are happy and content with it.
See, the thing I'm most proud of is my parents. I don't know if I'm a believe in God or something, but I think parents are gods. Of course, there are parents who are horrible towards their children. If you see Crime Patrol and things like that, but normal parents aren't. And my parents were the most perfect. I know that I only wish they were alive now. My father expired in 2002 and my mother in 2012. And it's as if one third of me has died with them each time. So I'm only one third of what I was before my father expired. So I'm proud of them. I'm proud of everything. Everyone should be proud of their identity. They should not feel ashamed. And without hating other identities, that is the thing. I'm proud also of, the fact that I try to be scrupulously honest. And more than that, like, for example, I used to eat non-veg food. And then when I was in the school in 9th standard, I decided it's wrong to kill animals. So I stopped. I continue to eat eggs because it does not actually stick. But I never advise others you don't eat because it is all a personal thing. Each person has to decide on his own. And even now, I left it in 73. So that you will see is almost 50 years ago. But even now, when I see and smell non-veg food, my mouth waters because see, the mind can decide, but the tongue and the senses are different. So you see, my principal belief is, um, do good to others, and if you can't do good, at least don't do bad. You know, there is a Hindi film song of Muhammad Hafiz. दुनिया में आया है तो फूल खिलाए जा, आंसू किसी की हो, खुशियां लुटाए जा. So that is my principle in life, and that makes me happy. Of course, no one is really happy. Each one has his own problems. So that is the case with everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Shrikantji. And any concluding remarks that you would like to end this interview with? Concluding remarks?
Read my what I have written and then consider it, instead of just dismissing me as a bank clerk, as someone who is not writing in peer-reviewed journals. That kind of thing irritates me, because they are people, who are not honest. They just dismiss based on status. That is the one thing I want to say, that people should read. And if you can really find some mistake, show it to me. I will be happy, because I don't want my mistakes to be shown after I'm dead and I cannot correct them. I want them to be shown when I'm alive. I can correct them, or else I can show that they are not mistakes. So that is my closing remark.
And Shrikantji, you made this very important point of peer-reviewed. Has
Yeah.
Indian knowledge ever been peer-reviewed thing? Or, I mean, how is the Indian knowledge, and do we have to ascribe? And what is wrong with this peer-reviewed culture, actually?
Yeah. See, these are all, mutual admiration societies and mutual backpatting clubs. So they review each other. Things which was written 40 years ago are still repeated in peer-reviewed papers, although they have been completely disproved. And it's just depends upon whether you know the right people. And there is a closed circle which does this thing. So if they say 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, and you say 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, people will accept them because they are peer-reviewed papers and you are not peer-reviewed. So I don't have any respect for that. I have only respect for the data, facts, and logic, and for the truth, not for who is saying it. That makes no difference.
I think that was a wonderful interview we had with you, Shrikantji, and I can only thank you for all the work you've done. And we remain inspired, and many people look up to you and hope to follow in the path that you and Dr. Conrad Elst have laid down in the Aryan Invasion, the Vedic studies, and other things. But Shrikantji will forever remain indebted to you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
blessing this Sangam
Thank
Talks
you.
and blessing this country by being born in it. We thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
I think you speak from your heart, and I think that is the best thing one can do. And I have enjoyed this interview thoroughly. I'm sure everybody else will. Thank you, Shrikantji. Thank you for
Thank
blessing.
you.
Thank you.